Persuading people to take the actions we want can be hard. Our teams and clients are bombarded with thousands of messages every single day. But there is a way for you to get above the noise. Stories. This is the Stories with Traction podcast, and I'm your host, Matt Zaun. Join my guests and me as we unpack the power of storytelling. We'll talk about topics like leadership, sales, and marketing, all through the lens of strategic storytelling. Enjoy this episode. If you have ever heard a fascinating TEDx and you've thought to yourself, I want to do that, but I don't know how, this episode is for you. Today, I'm joined by Bobby Umar. He is the CEO of DYPB, Discover Your Personal Brand, and he is a 5-time TEDx speaker. Welcome to the show, Bobby.
Happy to be here, Matt.
Thanks for your time. I appreciate it. You know, it's amazing to me the amount of times people have asked me how to be a TEDx speaker. I've been asked that numerous times over the years, upwards of probably a dozen times where people have asked that question to me. That is not my zone of genius. That is not my expertise. So it is awesome to have you on so we could really dive into what it means to land, create, and leverage a TEDx talk. So let's start with getting a TEDx talk. If someone listening to this is interested in being a TEDx speaker, what do they do logistically speaking to do that?
Well, the general idea, number one, is what is your main idea or story you want to share? I think a lot of people don't even know what that is, or they come up with a lot of things that are not really that great or aligned. So I think that's the first thing you got to do. And then the second part is really to understand the process of how do you actually get a TEDx talk. Most people ask the question, hey, how do you do this? Because really no one knows, and it's not really something that's published out there. And every single TEDx event is different in how they do it. So if you understand that, it's hard for people to figure out that actual process. So learning the process to actually apply for and make sure people actually like what you're doing and align with the theme of the event, those two things, having the right idea and then having the right application process to make sure you get the TEDx talk, those are probably the two biggest things that you need. Now, there's other things that help, of course, like networking, doing relationships help, having a strong thought leadership brand out there and digital presence helps, having experience as a speaker or a content creator can help. But having a book, having a program, winning a gold medal, being well known, those things can help. But the two biggest things that are really helpful is having a clear idea and story, and then actually going through the correct, proper process to get noticed and actually get chosen.
All very good pieces of information. Before we dive into the create, I just want to stress, you had mentioned every TEDx is a little different. So I want to talk about themes. What would be some themes of different TEDx?
Well, they're quite varied because, there's certain TEDx events that are focused on, for example, women or youth. There's other TEDx events that are focused more on the technology piece. I mean, if you look at TED, actually stands for technology, entertainment, and design. Those are three very different things. And not that every TEDx event has to be those three things or one of those three things, but they can vary. There was one that my fifth TEDx talk that I applied for, it was called The Power of Connection. I was like, oh, that's fantastic. That's exactly right up my alley in terms of what I like to talk about. So I submitted a pitch for them. And other ones are things like, I saw one that was about community. Another one was about reinvention. I've seen another one that was about struggle. There was one about pain. So they really have quite a wide variety of themes and topics.
So people should find the themes and figure out if they're in alignment with those themes?
Ideally, yes. For me, my standard process is actually to come up with 3 TEDx talk ideas. And if they're different enough, you can actually line them with a variety of themes as opposed to just being stuck on the one theme that you have. If your talk is just about parenting and you're looking for that one parenting themed TEDx talk, that's quite niche. And so you might have trouble doing that. What are the other 2 talks you have in mind? You always have to have a TED talk in your back pocket.
Now, what about geography when it comes to location? So let's say there's a business leader that they are they're very focused on a certain city. Maybe they have a really good presence. They've done a ton of work in a city. Should they focus on being within an hour or 2 drive of that city when it comes to a TEDx, or should they not worry about that? They should be willing to go anywhere regarding the theme that they're in alignment with. What do you say about the geography of the TEDx talk itself?
Well, that's a good question. Ideally, there are TEDx curators or event organizers who want people who are within the local area. So there's a benefit to them as well. But at the same time, you have to also put a value on what is the TEDx worth to you? Because for many people, the TEDx is worth quite a lot because it lands you $1,000 of speaking gigs. It lands you $1,000 of more business. It gets you to double your fees. And so the value of it, if it means you travel somewhere far to have it done and make it part of your thought leadership brand, then you should go. One of my colleagues, she had an opportunity, and I'm based in Canada, but she had an opportunity to go to Zurich and for her first TEDx talk, but she did it because it was really important to her. She wanted to get it done, and she had some connections there. So, go for it. So I would say that if you really want it and you really understand the value of what it's going to do for your brand and your business, then you should be willing to go anywhere.
Great. All right. So let's say they're dialed into the theme, they're in alignment with that, they understand the location they want to go to. Now let's talk about creating the talk. What are some best practices regarding the talk creation?
Well, there's a lot of not to do. So for example, you're not supposed to pitch your business at all. So don't, try to pitch your business. And what's interesting is that most talks don't actually have to be about your work. Some of the best TEDx talks are about a personal story that you've been through, something that people wouldn't expect, because at the end of the day, those talks still make you very human, relatable, connected to, and that's still going to drive your business or brand growth. Um, the other thing is, again, play to the audience, right? The audience of TEDx is different than other types of audiences. So if you know exactly, who the audience is and what they're all about, it's really all about sharing an idea, sharing your story, sharing an idea. What's that one concept? The other thing I'll say is that the TEDx talk has to be simple. People often try to complicate it a bit too much. Here's my 17-step process. Okay, you know what? That's a lot. What's the one thing, maybe three key things you want to talk about? But like, what's that one key thing? And then the last thing I'll say is that, storytelling is immersed throughout the TEDx talks. It's a huge part of what sets them apart. And usually most TEDx talks start with the story, and then they get into the insights and what the learning is. Other times they talk about the key aspects, but each key aspect has a story assigned to it. So it's important to understand that.
Let's talk about timing, because you say one
Sure.
key thing. When you I'm sure you've not only you mentioned not only did a bunch, the five, but also you probably heard and evaluated a lot. Is there a current time that's the best? Whether is it 8 minutes? Is it 10? What is like the sweet spot regarding timing when it comes to TEDx talks?
Yeah, so the standard for TEDx talks is 18 minutes.
18. Okay.
Yeah, so that's what they say. And then depending on the event, they'll give you a certain amount of time. So my first TEDx talk I did, I was given 14 minutes. Other times they give you less or they'll give you more. Most people will say I need the full 18 minutes because it's quite daunting. I mean, even for me, my first TEDx talk, I was nervous. They said, Bobby, give us the best idea of your life, dive deep in your personal story, do it with minimal slides. And I'm a super PowerPoint guy. Do it with minimal slides and then do it in 18 minutes. I was like, 18 minutes? Holy cow, like that's really short. And so it's very nerve-wracking for me to do that. But 18 minutes is standard. However, there are TED Talks that are really short. I mean, the famous um, paper towel one was only 3 minutes long. There's another one to tie your shoelace, 3 minutes long. One of the things that is notable is that while most people go for the 12, 15, 18-minute TED Talks, the ones that are 3 or 6 minutes are gold, because if you can come up with a TED Talk that short and that sweet, that's a really unique idea, you're actually far more likely to get it, because the TEDx organizers love that. They love the short ones, right? It's easier to fit in. Let's say they have a full range of speakers. Hey, I have this great 3-minute TED Talk idea. Can you slot me in? Absolutely. So the shorter ones are actually quite interesting.
I appreciate you mentioning that. Now let's focus on the 18 though, because I
Sure.
don't want people to lose sight of this. Is
That's the
that
standard.
yeah, there's a lot of people listening. They're probably thinking to themselves, I've done tons of staff meetings over the years. I've, a lot of virtual events, in-person events. I do tons of speaking. I'm sure someone's thinking that, they could get out, they could speak for hours. But I want you to talk about the importance of making every single minute of those 18 minutes matter.
Yeah, I mean, one of the best things about a TEDx talk in terms of benefit is it teaches you to be concise and to the point, and not put in and not try to segue into lots of other things. So that conciseness, that brief storytelling, the ability to get to the point is to me a really tremendous skill set that it teaches you, but also something you'll grow and learn from by actually doing one. Because most of us, yeah, especially at especially those of us who have seasoned experience and have years and years behind us, we can go on about something for a long time, right? So how do you just keep it short and sweet, but also at the same time make it resonant and make it relevant so that at the end of it, you know what, that inspired me, it's moved me to action, and I connect with that individual. That to me is the ideal TEDx talk.
Is there a flow or a map or a journey regarding maybe like starting with a story and then maybe diving into the data points and then a story and then some action steps? Is there a typical journey that you're taking the audience on in a TEDx that you've seen?
From what I've seen and having worked with lots and lots of people on their TEDx talks, it's different for every single person because every TEDx event is structured differently, and every TEDx talk idea is also structured differently. That said, a very common theme is to start with the story, then dive into the insight, where then you may share, the data or what are the key takeaways, whatever, and then you close with what's that final call to action. But I would say that there have been TEDx talks that change from that, and it depends on who the person is and what exactly they want to talk about.
What if there's someone listening to this episode and they're thinking to themselves, they want to do a TEDx, but they're thinking, I don't have any amazing stories that are going to wow my audience. What would you say to that?
I'd say that's bullshit because people don't realize that. In fact, my signature methodology that I work on now with clients, which I've kind of honed over the last 2 years, is is to really dive into and extract those stories. One of the biggest things that happens, and this happened with one of my first clients way, way long ago, is that she had this really interesting life story and she wanted to tell the whole story. And I'm like, look, that's not how TED Talks work. They're not going to hear your life story. It's a snippet of your life story. And we found something, a snippet, and we pull that out. Tell me more about that. That's what I want to hear about. And so for me, you can figure out those stories. So what I do now with my methodology is I say, look, I want to take you through your entire life story. I want to then extract a dozen story ideas from this, and then maybe leveraging crowdsourcing with social media. Let's get down to your top 3 to 5 that people are really excited about. Because every single person has a story, every single person has ideas. So whether you're a seasoned person or a young person, I mean, heck, there are 10-year-olds who give TED Talks. Why? Because they were able to get a really cool idea or story that they then talked about. So you may think that you're the most boring person on earth. I can tell you, you are not. You all have tons of amazing things about yourself. And again, that's a mindset thing. We all think that about ourselves. I did a post recently about the fact that one of the biggest barriers to TED Talks is this feeling that, oh, I have nothing to say, or I have no good ideas, or I'm a pretty boring person. No, you know what? You have a ton in your story, in your life story, but the challenge is to dive deep and extract it. Just like people say, oh, I don't have any problems with my mindset, or I have no emotional issues. Well, if you dig deep and get some counseling, you will actually find things. They're deeply in there, and you uncover them. Like, oh my God, I did that with my food issues, with binge eating, and I had to really dive deep over several years, and I found stuff. Just like with your story, if you dive deep in your story, you'll find so many beautiful nuggets that you never anticipated.
As soon as you said binge eating, I related. I continue to relate to that. So I wrestled for 10 years and it messed me up regarding a binge purge relationship with
Right.
food. I've had to dive real deep into figuring out how to have a healthy relationship with food. So as soon as you said that,
Yeah.
again, is it the most profound, amazing story in the history of the world? No, but I immediately related to it.
And
And
and I, and I've been struggling with this for 20 years, but then
sure.
when I finally dove deep and worked with a therapist, things like that, like then I uncovered the stuff that I wasn't even realizing. And then I found more clarity and more focus and more purpose of what I'm doing in terms of how I'm moving forward and also how I'm navigating it.
Powerful stuff. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. Would you find more than not it's cutting things out versus trying to fill the time? Meaning, should someone focus on maybe creating an hour of content and then cutting to 18 minutes? Or do you find maybe someone will have like 10 minutes of content and then they're trying to stretch and expand to those 18?
It's a good question. I mean, before I did the TEDx talk stuff, I worked with just paid speakers. And I always said that, what is your 1, 2, or 3 big ideas? Have that keynote version of it, have the TEDx version of it, and have the 3-minute video version of it. So, you could have an hour long talk or a 30-minute talk and then turn it into a TED talk. It's much easier to take a really good idea and a really good setup presentation and then hone it in a way that's really concise and gets to the point. I'd rather do that, to edit the best pieces than actually try to fill space. If that makes sense.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So let's say someone they understand how to land a TED Talk. They created the stories and also the one key thing they're going to focus on, and then they actually do the TEDx and it goes exceptionally well. Now, how do they leverage it? I want you to speak to people so they could see this more from a futuristic perspective, what it could do for them when it comes to sales, marketing, branding, boosting their business. How can they truly leverage a TEDx talk?
Well, let's go before the TEDx actually happens. So what you should be doing is you should be using the social media and your branding to actually talk about this. Take people on the journey of what you're doing before the announcement, you get accepted. Now you're preparing, you're crowdsourcing. Hey, here's some of the thoughts I got. What do you guys think about this? What do you think of this story? Take them through the journey with you, because when it comes to digital thought leadership, which is something that I love to talk about, taking people on the journey with what you're going through empowers them to be part of it, and they love that whole feeling. Because then later on, now you're top of mind, and they're thinking about you when they're thinking about you as an expert storyteller or expert authority in your field. I mean, that's what TEDx does for you. And then once you have the TEDx talk, yeah, like what are you releasing from the video? Are you launching it in snippets? Are you putting like pieces of it and turning them into content that you can repurpose across all platforms? Yes, you should be thinking about those things, because once you add TEDx to your brand, you're instantly seen as someone with credibility, as somebody who has authority in their space, an expert in their field. You're a storyteller, you're a coach, you're a consultant. Like there's so much there that you can leverage. So you put that in your branding, you put that in your email marketing, you put that in everything you talk about. And of course, you continue to share nuggets and stories from that experience and from the talk itself as you're putting stuff out there. So when I'm talking to clients, or when I'm putting stuff out there, I'll mention the 5-time TEDx speaker. I'll mention the things that I talked about. I'll mention the thing, because that branding piece sets you apart. And that's where when you are pricing your services or your speaking fees, you can go higher than you did before. When you're pricing other things, you can go higher. You actually attract higher level people, whether it's for job opportunities or for business leads or for potential clients. So what I would say is that it should be part of your marketing, but the other thing it should be part of your branding. So for example, let's say if I were to do a TEDx talk on binge eating per se, even though my main area is, personal brand thought leadership, TEDx talks, I would take that TEDx talk that I did on binge eating and reframe it in terms of what I do for a living. So, for example, binge eating, here are 3 things I learned from binge eating. I'll take one of those pieces and I'm going to apply it to personal branding, or apply it to thought leadership, or apply it to how to get a TEDx talk, because that's actually going to be far more relevant. Take the story and idea that you had and then reframe it within the scope of what you do for a living. That works very, very well to generate more business and get better clients.
Let's dive more into take people on the journey with you, because I want people
Yeah.
to have pictures in their mind of what that looks like. So are you referring to, that maybe they're driving to the event, so they're getting in the car, they're saying, hey, heading to the TEDx event, and then maybe the setup behind the scenes, and that, like, is it every stage along the way them sharing their journey, or what does that look like?
Yeah, so I mean, I would share the acceptance letter that you're going to the TEDx event. I would share a sneak peek of the slides you're creating for the TEDx talk. I would share a drive-by of the event space the week before it's happening, right? There's probably a tech rehearsal, and you can show the stage and the audience that's empty, and take a photo of that. Take a video of yourself. How does this feel? I'm 1 week away, or I'm 1 day away, or I'm 1 hour away. Take us through every single aspect of it. After it's done, I've done my TEDx talk. How do I feel? Interview people. Hey guys, I just did my TEDx talk. What was your impression? Get people to share with you. Make them part of the journey. A day after is reflections of what happened and what I learned from it. People that I met, things that I did, talks that I saw. Because one of the things about TEDx too is it's giving too. You might see other, like my first TEDx talk I ever did, I saw 2 other amazing talks. I was like, wow, these guys are so good. And I was like talking about them, and all 3 of us became good buddies. And that was an amazing experience to share with everybody. And pretty soon we collaborated with one another. So I would actually look at every single moment where you're experiencing and feeling and learning, and you want people to feel it, learn, and experience with you. That's what you take them on.
So years ago, I tied into the National Speakers Association, the Philadelphia chapter, and
Yeah.
there's two speakers in particular that I want to mention. They both did TEDx's. Okay, one, well, both of them were very good from a content perspective. So when you watched the talk, you got a lot out of both of them. One landed a substantial amount of business from the TEDx. The other got nothing out of it. Now, here's what's interesting to me. The person that got a lot out of it, they got their audience prepped for this. This person mentioned to me, she said she sent out a bunch of emails to different organizations on the topic and getting them excited on when it was going to launch. And then there was tons of different emails and almost a whole PR apparatus built
Yeah.
around her regarding this. And it did exceptionally well. The other one focused so much on the preparation leading up to it, failed to do anything on what happens when this does go well. So to make sure that doesn't happen to anyone else, what are some things people can get in place to make sure that they can line things up, to make sure that it really maximizes the amount of time seeing that talk to land more business?
Well, I think that we already talked about the fact that, taking people on the story is one piece. The other thing that you mentioned, which is the PR piece, a lot of people don't really think about that. But having a PR machine in place where you actually have press releases sent out, here's what, like Bob Newman's going to be featured on this thing. He's going to talk about this. And if you want to interview him and to talk about the three key points he's going to talk about, then that could go very well. So I think being able to position yourself to do PR on media and showing up on radio shows and TV shows and things like that. Secondly, being able to talk about what you're going to talk about on the TEDx talks in podcasts and other types of interviews where people can actually interview. That again builds the awareness. The one that I think a lot of us don't use as much is our friend network. Like, this is a big deal. It's a big deal. Like, my first TEDx talk was a very, very big deal to me. And I asked everyone to share it. I asked everyone, listen, this is my first time. I really want to make this big. Can you please help me with this? And I had dozens of people in my corner willing to share and build energy around that first talk. And that's why the first talk, I think, did quite well with the reach and the views and things like that. I think that's an important piece. And then I think the last one is, after the talk is done, what are you doing to actually talk about it and keep the relevance alive moving forward? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, the primary goal you want actually is you want to get one is to have the video, which is great. The video is a great marketing tool. But what you really want is you want to have the awareness building program after the talk comes out. And most importantly, you want to have a good enough talk that it gets on the TED.com site, because that's when things take off. The people that I know who've done that, and we know the famous ones like Simon Sinek and Brené Brown, who did these TEDx talks that got featured on the TED.com site, and then their businesses and their brands took off like crazy. That's what you want, because it's a very, very small percentage that gets on the TED.com website.
Wow. Thank you so much. I
No
learned
problem.
so much regarding landing, creating, and leveraging a TEDx talk from you today. Thank you. There's three takeaways that I got from this conversation, Bobby. The first is TEDx events have different themes, and we need to focus on the theme that aligns with what we do. I very much appreciate that. The second is the importance of those personal stories and making sure that we're keeping it simple and focusing on one key point. And then the third and final piece that I think a lot of people can learn from is taking people on the journey with us from start and then even past the finish stage. So I appreciate those 3 points. Now, if anyone wants to get more information on you, they want to reach out for coaching regarding TEDx, where's the best place they can go to get that information?
I think the best places are either my website, rayallen.com, or my LinkedIn profile. You'll see everything that I do there in terms of what I talk about. I'm across all social media too, all the other platforms as well, but those are probably the two best ones.
Perfect. I will include that in the show notes. People would just click and go from there. Thank you so much, Bobby. I very much appreciate our time together today.
My pleasure, Matt. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Stories with Traction podcast. Please leave a review, since positive reviews will make it easier for others to find this conversation. Next episode will launch on Friday at 8 a.m. Eastern. Until then, remember, if you want to persuade with power and inspire those around you to action, you must share more stories.